Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Lecture 16 in the series of Philosophy and Leadership of Occupational Health and Safety. If you recall, ladies and gentlemen, for the last 4 months, we've been covering that course. And so far, we have covered 15 lectures, right? And today, we move into our final lecture, and this will be the last lecture for this course. And hopefully we will meet in other courses, and we shall be able to exchange ideas. Just to remind you what we covered, in lecture 13 and lecture 14, we introduced the concept of leadership. And in this case, not the general leadership, but safety leadership, because we are dealing with occupational health safety issues. So we did introduce those aspects, and I gave you those defining features or constructs of safety leadership. Now in lecture 15, I introduced a topic of safety leadership behaviors and how we can transform the intangible to the tangible. Now, in that lecture, if you recall, we discussed the psychological and cognitive influences on behavior. We discussed how the behavior-based safety link can be used to explain safety leadership. We also did discuss the examples of tangible safety leadership behaviors. And then, of course, we did not really go into details of how we can adapt the style of leadership to develop specific set of safety leadership behaviors. Ladies and gentlemen, if you recall, there are so many things that I did introduce, specifically from the area of psychology, because I told you that this concept of leadership that we are discussing, and that is linked to environmental health, is interdisciplinary in nature. And therefore, in the previous lecture, we looked at the role of behavioral-based safety. We looked at the works of Thorndike, 1898, a prominent behavioral psychologist. We looked at Ivan Pavlov's experiments in the 1890s. We also discussed, for instance, the works of Skinner, 1938, in terms of operant conditioning and as a method of learning. And of course, the various responses or operants under Skinner's, the neutral operants, the reinforcers, and the punishers. I hope you still remember that. Then from there, I took you to Bandura, 1961, with the social learning theory and the experiments that he carried out, of course, that relates to Bobodol experiment, right? Now, ladies and gentlemen, we discussed all those things, and then from there, we looked at the specific safety leadership behaviors, and I gave you a table. I hope you still remember, because in that table, we looked at safety behaviors. We examined the engagement behaviors, and we also looked at the vision setting behaviors as contextualized safety leadership behaviors. And these were very critical and very important in informing our subject. Now, in the process of discussing those things, if you recall, ladies and gentlemen, I did tell you that it's important for leaders to think about adaptive safety leadership behaviors and also personal variables and influences on behavior, and then the integrated biopsychological or psychosocial models where we looked at the cognitive safety, the neuroplasticity, and plus a number of other things, ladies and gentlemen. So it's very important for you to understand those aspects because they have implications on safety behavior. Towards the end, we discussed psychological considerations, and unfortunately we did not complete, but we stopped at a time when I had given you examples of the research we ourselves have done and published in the Journal of Public Administration and Leadership Styles, Workplace Politics and Moral Identity of Ugandan Public Procurement Staff. Then the other work that we've done on leadership, ethical orientations, mindfulness, task autonomy, and of course performance, but in the Comesa region. And this information is available on the internet. And also have ongoing research on authentic leadership and ethical orientations. And certainly those results are very important. Now, from our discussion that leads to psychology or psychological concepts, ladies and gentlemen, I did tell you that there are a number of cognitive distortions or biases that influence the behavior of safety leaders. And these biases are very important, and we need to understand these biases because of where they are kept and how they come to the fore, ladies and gentlemen. So cognitive biases are very important because if they are left unchecked, ladies and gentlemen, those cognitive distortions can adversely influence your leadership style. They can also influence your ability to function in most social situations, and that's why you need to understand them. And those cognitive distortions, ladies and gentlemen, can also be colloquially known as automatic negative thoughts, which you can call ANTs. A-N-T, A, automatic, and of course N, negative, and T, thoughts, ANTs. So these ANTs, or cognitive distortions, or negative, automatic negative thoughts, ladies and gentlemen, can come unannounced. They come unplanned. You don't actually plan for them, but somehow they surface. They come to the fore, and in some instances they are triggered by certain situations, and they are also triggered by certain individuals and the environment. And we've got a plethora of distortions which are well documented by Beck, 1995. But I'll not go through all of them. I'll just probably mention only 5 so that we understand how these can influence safety leadership behaviors. The first ant, what we call cognitive distortion, is filtering. Ladies and gentlemen, this filtering that we see here is also categorized by an individual, is categorized by an individual paying undue attention to one negative detail without seeing the bigger picture. And this usually happens to individuals. So for you, you see a small thing and you tend to blow it up, and this is given undue attention, and you forget about paying attention to detail. And this is what you call filtering. It's a cognitive distortion. And if you're a leader who is preoccupied with this, you will be seeing negative details. You'll be seeing faults most of the time, right? And those are the things that your mind will be filtering from time to time, and the attention will be put towards that. So once you decide to take on the safety negative, sorry, not negative, if you try to undertake safety leadership style of management, then you need to really think very, very hard not to be influenced by filtering, where you focus your attention to the things that have not gone right. Now, similarly, we have overgeneralization, and this is another ant, automatic negative thought, right? And this one here is sweeping negative. You know, people make sweeping negative conclusions, right, that go beyond the current situation. So the fellows don't have data, they don't have evidence, they don't have this and the other, but they will tend to make sweeping statements. They will tend to make sweeping conclusions that will go even beyond the current situation that we are trying to handle at this material time, ladies and gentlemen. The third one is what we call catastrophizing. That is from catastrophe. Right, predicting the future negatively without considering more plausible outcome. So for you to be saying, well, things are likely to be terrible, horrible in the coming 1 year, safety sort of precautions and practices in these organizations are worsening, so next year things will be harder than what they are now. That means you are catastrophizing, ladies and gentlemen. So predicting the future negatively without considering more plausible outcomes. So it's important for you to consider those plausible outcomes. So if you're a leader and you are taken up by this will be another automatic negative thought, what we call cognitive distortions that may not allow you to achieve what you want to achieve. The fourth one is what we call emotional reasoning. Now, with emotional reasoning, we have feelings that start to drive thought processes where logic, the concept of logic, of course, will be jettisoned, right? In other words, it will go into exile. It will be abandoned due to the way someone feels about something. So in other words, you tend to bring in feelings, right? Instead of working objectively and thinking objectively, right, but you get feelings in your mind that start to drive thought processes where you simply forget logic. Logic goes into exile, and these emotions and feelings take control, and that's unfortunate. And then, of course, the last one, which is the fifth, is personalization. And this is the belief that other people are behaving negatively because of something you did, instead of considering other alternatives. So we are simply telling you, avoid personalizing issues if you are going to be a very good safety leader in an organization. So you need to know this very well and bring this to your attention, because a leader, if that leader is not aware of your cognitive distortions, you may not be able to get results, because you will start to fall in the trap of such negative commentary, and yet we want to achieve results at the end of the day. So it's very important for us to understand that. Let me just give you an example, and I think I will just pick one from those automatic negative thoughts, right, just to illustrate our point. And the thought that I'm going to pick here is catastrophizing, right? Because in the interest of time, and I want you to really go and read, because at this level, you are supposed to read a lot and conceptualize. Let me take that as an example. So, for example, a leader has cognitive distortions of catastrophizing. What will happen? What will happen here is that that leader, right, will shy away from challenging safety conversations, right, because of this catastrophizing thing. So he shies away. Whenever he meets challenging safety conversations from subordinates, from leaders, he feels very bad, right? And he will say, well, things are going to be very bad next year. Things are worsening in this organization. We are going nowhere. So in other words, this person is always predicting doom instead of being positive, ladies and gentlemen. And that is catastrophizing. We also see that at this level, because of a fear that it may lead to a heated argument, the fellow will withdraw, right? And this is likely to cascade into performance management. Of course, it will trickle down to an issue of unemployment, And of course, at the end of the day, you have issues of poverty, issues of homelessness. It is not forgetting to mention what we call the safety and well-being issues, issues of illness that come as a result of pressures at work, right? Issues of depression, issues of burnout, issues of stress, issues of cardiovascular aspects, related issues. So those are some of the things that may come up, ladies and gentlemen. So as managers, we need to understand these ants very well, right? And that's why we need to know where we are so that we do not shy away from these things. A manager who has that catastrophizing element will certainly shy away from most of the activities, and of course at the end of the day the fellow will become unproductive at the workplace. Now, some of the helpful things that you can do, ladies and gentlemen, to deal with those things is for you to think about the alternatives from time to time, and of course looking at the various views, and of course also try to come up with a risk management framework, and always to try and get evidence to support whatever you are doing, and not to pay attention only to the dark side of the moon, but also on the bright side of the moon, and having really those major aspects. Ladies and gentlemen, I know there are also a number of other environmental issues. Those were psychological. And I want you to really go and read about these environmental issues. I can tell you there are those external environmental issues like political factors. These will all affect, for instance, the safety leadership style that you are going to take on. The internal policies of the organizations, they may impact a number of things. The changing governments, they can also reflect changes in the subsidized businesses, development programs, public funding, resourcing, etc. and etc. I hope you understand what I'm talking about. Let me just give you an example. When the USA President Donald Trump took power some time back, I hope you still remember. Now, in 2017, early 2017, the US President Donald Trump announced withdrawal from the Paris Climate Treaty. And that's an example of the backlash that can face politicians if their choices are not on the right side of popular opinion. And that happened. And that's why now we need to look at the environmental factor, the political factor, the social factor, the economic factors, and so forth, because all these things are there. The legal factors, right, because they all do influence the behavior of employees and the type of models that we adopt at the workplace. Ladies and gentlemen, right now, allow me to delve into the last part of our lecture, and it will take a very short time, and I will conclude. At this time, I want to go to the last part of the lecture. And the last part deals with the development of a model, and I call it a model of safety leadership influence. And I call it a golden road to safety leadership. So I want now to point you to a diagram here, right? And this diagram is very important for us to understand and conceptualize the model of safety leadership influence. And I want you to pay attention to the issues that are articulated in this model, ladies and gentlemen. This model is very, very, very important. And in this model, I want you to understand that we are emphasizing the ideas covered in our lecture 13 and lecture 14 to develop practical tools and suggestions to help leaders exercise safety leadership. And that's why we have this model that we've put together. And through empirical works, ladies and gentlemen, we have discovered that safety leadership can be transferable. We have discovered that safety leadership is translatable. We have also discovered in safety leadership that it can be applied within the workplace. And that's why we have this model here. Now, ladies and gentlemen, within the course of these issues that we are discussing, we shall have a number of questions that we are going to pose, but try to answer them quite briefly. So I'm providing the bedrock of safety leadership, which is mapped out in this lecture through the empirically founded RAV, right? And I'll be telling you what RAV model, or those concepts of RAV, actually do constitute. So this lecture, ladies and gentlemen, as we continue discussing, helps us map out the importance of RAV, right? I will show you what these elements are, and RAV is an abbreviation or an acronym, ladies and gentlemen. But this is the model that you are seeing at the end of the day. So we also tell you that these things are very important, and as we conclude our lecture here, right, and they increase our understanding and application of safety leadership. So it's only after we have understood these things that we are able to move. If you recall, I told you that leadership models and frameworks are plentiful, and there are many. They can be integrated well if probably contextualized. If you contextualize these things wisely, then it is possible for you to integrate all those concepts in a workable model or a mind map here. And of course, all these things can be positioned in the organizational culture and safety processes. And then at the end of the day, you are able to compare or make comparisons of one organization's safety leadership process over another safety leadership processes. And of course, without really raising too many issues, because at the end of the day, this is a learning process that you must be able to understand. Ladies and gentlemen, I have already told you that we have this concept called RAV, right? And RAV, as you can see, is an abbreviation, right? Where the first R refers to relationships, right? Where A refers to authenticity, where V refers to vision, and E refers to engagement. So these are very important aspects which are presented in this model here. Now we see from this model that each section of the RAV model is further broken down into specifics. So when you come here, you will see the specifics. If you go there, you will see the specifics everywhere. And of course, these have been touched upon in the previous lecture, especially in form of the variables that do matter in our case. So this figure that you are seeing, ladies and gentlemen, I hope you are seeing these things very well, but if you are not seeing, we could as well enlarge these things so that you see them properly. Now in this model, you'll see we have engagement, right? Engagement is here. Here we've got relationships. Remember, we are dealing with RAV model. R, the first R refers to relationships. And this is the box here, relationship, right? The second A acronym here is here, authenticity. Relationships is here, authenticity is there. Right, that is RA, R-A, right. Then we see V down here, vision, right. And then we see E, and that is engagement. Engagement is here. That is the RAV model. So we have come up with this model that can actually guide the development and implementation of safety leadership in organizations. So let's start with the R that we have. So this R here is broken down into smaller components, as you can see. So we have leader-member exchange, we have empathy, we've got discipline, and we have similarity. So a safety leader must be able to build relationship through leader-member exchanges, and you are aware of this. So what I'll do, later on after taking your eyes off this diagram, I'll only talk about leader-member exchange. Possibly it may seem to be new in this case, and how it relates to safety leadership. Right, the aim, the authenticity, here we have demonstrated safe behaviors, right, by the leader, the safe behaviors, personal and ethical awareness, and transparency. All these things are covered here, ladies and gentlemen. That's our aim. Now V, that's the vision. As you can see here, you must have a clear vision, expectations, and then rhetoric. These are also very important. Right, now we also have E here, engagement. And I've already discussed engagement in terms of communication, openness, distribution of justice as well. So that is RAV. Those are the 4 components: relationship, authenticity, and vision. Now in the middle, we've got safety leadership. Now safety leadership cannot exist without these 4 components, 1, 2, 3, 4. And then at the end of the day, safety leadership will portray certain behaviors here, because you are combining the other elements. In other words, your behaviors can be referred to as discussing safety at the workplace. Then you have leadership, walkthrough, then receiving and providing feedback. Then you have to outline expectations. And then at the end of the day, you share safety stories. Right, I think you can see all those things, safety stories and values, and abiding by safety rules. Right, that's what you have there. Now on the other side, we have, for instance, legislation, right? Because most of the things we have been discussing come from documents, international treaties, organizations and conventions, and documents. So you know we have borrowed a lot from International Labour Organization, from United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, and so forth. So that's why you have legislation, this side. We have lag, lead indicators, risk assessments, and reporting processes. So ladies and gentlemen, these aspects here of a RAV model help us understand how we can develop these things at the workplace, and certainly use them to understand clearly what we are supposed to be doing and manage the workplace very well. So it's important that we discuss those things one by one and understand how we can develop a learning organization, because the RAV model, the components of the RAV model, as you see here, they are all interrelated in order to achieve the utopian vision of safety leadership, as you can see. And without the due consideration of supporting safety management systems, a proportion of safety leadership behaviors may not be embedded within the company. So therefore, as a result of these things, opportunities to develop a learning organization do exist, right? And therefore, we should not forfeit these possibilities. And at the end of the day, we measure the effectiveness by leadership, by actions, not leadership intent, as we saw earlier on, and then various behaviors. Now, allow me, ladies and gentlemen, at this material time, to only talk about and giving examples using only 2 aspects of the RAV model, and then thereafter I will conclude. And therefore, those 2 aspects that I'm going to choose, ladies and gentlemen, relates to relationships here, right? And we have seen those components of the leader-member exchange in relationships. I think I'll only pick that. The rest can be covered by you. The RAV model is a very nice model and can be implemented by anybody who is conscious about safety leadership. Right, but let me talk about relationships only in this model. Ladies and gentlemen, let me just ask you to stretch your mind a little bit. Imagine trying to influence someone that you have never spoken to before. I don't know what response you'll get. Right? Imagine also influencing someone you cannot find any common ground with. That will also be next to impossible. So as leaders, you need to be close to your employees, to the other members of management that come from other departments, so that you develop relationships, right? And here we are talking about safety relationships, safety leadership relationships. We are talking about professionalism. We are not talking about those relationships that are unproductive, that can easily destroy the organization. So, if there is no social currency, right, generated between two people, the ability to form solid working relationships may be impacted. Ladies and gentlemen, from a safety perspective, this could explain the malaise or the uneasiness that people feel when they are intervening in the presence of a safety breach or unsafe condition. Right? They do so because there is lack of social currency. There is lack of that social fabric. Right? So therefore, the worker-manager relationship can become pivotal in allowing the safety relationships to thrive, ladies and gentlemen. Let me just give you my own experience. I remember a site meeting that I attended, right? I attended a meeting at the construction site, and the construction manager, right, openly belittled and scolded a supervisor for parking in the wrong area. Right, so because of safety issues, of course, he may have been right because the man was not actually observing safety-related issues, but he openly, publicly scolded the supervisor, right? And of course, this created what we call humiliation, right? So the supervisor felt humiliated, right? But remember, this was in the meeting, right? And he publicly scolded him, and of course this man did not like it. He felt humiliated. And of course the other members who attended the meeting also felt very bad. So this man was, the construction manager was not very sensitive about the feelings and emotions of these fellows. So what happened during the meeting, as the meeting was progressing, of course everybody kept quiet, and he was talking alone, right? Now, later on, during the meeting, this construction manager asked the members to provide suggestions on how they can improve safety on site. I want to tell you, in response, the answer he got was a deafening silence, sprinkled in with large doses of tension. People did not want to respond. Right. And this was not the normal kind of thing that he was experiencing, but this is what happened during that day. So this is a prime example, ladies and gentlemen, of relationships, right? Impairing the free flow of information and adversely impacting on the level of openness between the worker and the manager without the consideration of the worker-related worker and manager-related relationship. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to tell you, since we have another aspect to cover, that it is for this reason that research that exists on the internet and of course the practicalities of the things that we have seen, leader-member exchange has been included in the relationship part of the RAV model. And ladies and gentlemen, as you can see here, leader-member exchange, which is an important aspect here, can be characterized by how well one works with the leader and how well the leader works with them. And that relationship is very important. Now, through enhanced working relationships, as we can see, the ability of the employees to voice their concerns starts to increase, which is precipitated by a foundation of trust. So leader-member exchange is one of the components that is included in relationships, because that's how you develop what we call productive relationships, ladies and gentlemen. And therefore, the practical components of embedding leader-member exchange can include driving team alignment, development of team capabilities, contextualizing rewards, ladies and gentlemen, to desired behaviors. And once you do that very well, then you are able to achieve results. There must be an upward communication system that is established in the organization. And the upward communication between the team members and the line managers becomes very important, and therefore this will improve the safety communication and therefore will limit safety incidents. And of course, the simplicity in having good team leaderships cannot be underrated, underestimated, and employees who have poor relationship with their leaders are going to be less inclined to extend themselves beyond what is needed, and may even start to look elsewhere for guidance and support instead of getting it from the technocrats in the organization, those fellows who understand the institution and the safety aspects very well. So the leader-member exchange relationship can be further enhanced through a number of things, like developing mutual trust by sharing information, reinforcing the desired behaviors, identifying common bonds, and working towards a shared goal, providing autonomy for the team members, ladies and gentlemen, and treating team members with respect and dignity, because that's what we all want. And the above behaviors, ladies and gentlemen, can be coated with a broad brush of safety through specific safety goals, through specific safety behaviors, through specific safety information, through specific safety autonomous decision making. So the safety leader, ladies and gentlemen, who is immune to the emotions and feelings of others, like the one I have just given you on the construction site, may lack the empathy needed in order to operate as an effective safety leader. Ladies and gentlemen, allow me to conclude the lecture. Ladies and gentlemen, we started off some time back, about 4 months ago, with an important course that we called the philosophy and leadership of occupational health and safety. Now, in that course, certainly we had a number of topics that we were supposed to cover. And if you recall, our first topic was environmental health and safety. The program you are pursuing is a Master of Science in Environmental Health and Safety. Now, in that program, you've got courses that you are supposed to cover. And one of the courses happens to be the philosophy and leadership of environmental health. Now, when we started out with environmental health, right, and safety, my objective was to demonstrate to you that environmental health has a natural science perspective. And in our first lecture of environmental health ethics, we did introduce the natural science concept and element, where we view environmental health as a natural science similar to biology and chemistry, and therefore you're going to test all those things, right? But later on, I convinced you in that lecture that this environmental health has the natural element, natural science perspective, and the applied element of it. And that's the time when I introduced issues of toxicology, I introduced issues of public health, and so forth. And these are very, very important. So I also gave you theories that have been used to explain behaviors, right? And all those theories have someone neglected the environment, right? Has neglected the biosphere. And therefore, I did tell you that it's important and necessary to come up with a theory of ethics that explains that. But certainly, I gave you all that information using information from the World Council of Sciences business report, and I did give you a definition of those things and demonstrated to you how the issue of health comes into relate to environmental health. And if you recall, in that lecture, I went ahead and brought the component of health. And therefore, I was able to contextualize what we call health, safety, and well-being of employees at the workplace. And I hope you still remember that. Then from that lecture, we went to lecture number 2, where we deal with the nature of the workplace, which is changing very, very, very fast. And then we went on all those topics and looked at the international conventions and treaties, international organizations, and so forth, the hard and soft measures. We continued up to the time where we deal with sustainability of businesses. And then from there, right now, I took you to lecture 13, lecture 14, 15, and 16, trying to understand the concept of leadership in as far as environmental health is concerned, and then health, safety, and well-being. And therefore, in our lecture 13, if you recall, we did study and cover the conceptualization of safety leadership and those things that constitute safety leadership. Now, in lecture 16, certainly we've gone through a number of things, including the psychological aspects and how you can develop a model that you can use to implement safety leadership within your organizations and outside the environment. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you very much for being attentive, and I want to thank the designers of the course for having given me the opportunity to facilitate this course. And I wish you a nice time, ladies and gentlemen. I can only say stay home and stay safe. And this is the end of our course, The Philosophy and Leadership of Occupational Health and Safety. Bye.